how do you distinguish between high discipline and tyrannizing yourself?
That's a really good question. You could ask the same thing about your children or your wife or your husband or your citizens. So, I'll tell you a story. So, near the end of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, the fractious and immature sojourners are lost in the desert again and running out of water. And they go to Moses, who's kind of fed up with them by this point, and for good reason, and say, we're out of water. We know you have a channel to God. Do you want to have a chat with him and see if we can get some water? And Moses says, okay. And he has a chat with God. And God says, there's some rocks nearby, and you're to go over to those rocks with Aaron, who's the political wing, by the way, the political wing of the spiritual. And you're to invite the rocks to give forth water. And so Moses and Aaron go to the rocks and they strike the rocks. Moses strikes the rocks with his staff. Now, his staff is an emblem of authority. It's the staff that has the living spirit in it. That's the serpent. It's the staff that springs into life when it's planted in the ground. It's living tradition. It's the staff of living tradition. It's the symbol of his authority granted to him by his relationship, his valid authority granted him by his relationship with God. And he uses that to demonstrate his power, and he uses force. And the rocks give forth water. And then Moses is punished with death and with failure to reach the promised land. And this is after guiding the Israelites out of tyranny through the desert for 4 decades. He uses force when he's told to use invitation, when he's told to use his language, his words, and not compulsion. And the punishment for that, even though he's arguably the greatest leader in the Old Testament library, is that he's sentenced to death and he doesn't reach the promised land. Don't use force. Don't use force, even on yourself. You got to invite yourself along for the ride. Now, that doesn't mean you get to be undisciplined, but you have to negotiate. It's like find something that you'll do. Find something good you'll do enthusiastically. Find something small enough so that you'll do it for good enthusiastically. And then build on that. And it's the same when you're dealing with your children or your wife or your husband. It's like, could we jointly come to a negotiated end that we would both be thrilled to pursue? And that's a great basis for negotiation. Like, if I'm talking to Tammy and she wants something and I want something, it isn't necessarily the case that we can come to an agreement that gives her what she wants and what I want. And what is this I that wants anyways? But maybe if we are honest and we let each other know what the situation is and we pay attention to what's right in front of us, we can negotiate a deal that's far better than anything we could have pursued on our own. And if that wasn't the case, then why the hell would you ever be married? I mean, the proposition of marriage is that you can do things better together than either of you could do alone. And so why couldn't it be the case that you could exchange your views and come up with a vision of how you might proceed that's far better than anything you could conjure up on your own, and that if you did that religiously, then you'd never have to use force because people would say, yeah, I could go for that. And then they're enthusiastically on board. And God only knows what you could accomplish then. And so, invitation, not force. Force is a sign of bad policy. Now, maybe you make exceptions for people who are truly malevolent, but you certainly do that with caution and with full knowledge that it's a suboptimal solution. Did I address that completely?
Yeah, I thought that was good.
Okay.
Between high discipline and tyrannizing?
Yeah. Highly disciplined and tyrannizing. Yeah, well, you see this in psychotherapy. So the psychoanalysts figured this out. Like if you're dealing with someone and you're both aiming at positive transformational change, sometimes the therapist, let's say, will offer some advice, and it's well-meaning, and maybe it's even accurate, but the person won't enact it, or they'll even do the opposite. And the reason for that is they're actually annoyed that the therapist is stealing their life. You can't tell someone else what to do exactly, because what the hell do you know about what they should do? You can invite them to participate in the process of discovering what they should do, and you can encourage them in that. But even if you are well-meaning, and even if you know what you're doing, if you impose it, you get what the psychoanalysts called resistance. People will work at cross purposes to your force, even despite themselves, and it's partly because they want to be free. So you want to make an offer, and you do that with vision. So your initial stance is to aim up. So you think you're sitting down to negotiate with your wife, and you think, okay, what the hell are we aiming at here? And you really got to think that this is a prayer. This is an attempt to establish a connection with the divine. You think, okay, I love my wife. You got to remember that and rediscover it. And what do I want? Well, I want her to love me. That'd be good. And I want her to be thrilled about the fact that we're together, and I want our life to improve continually, and I want to know what's going on with her, and I want her to know what's going on with me. And I want to do that in a way that's sustainable and joyful and playful, and that requires no force. Okay, so now you've identified the aim, and you've conjured up the right spirit. And now you can listen in the spirit of that aim. And then she'll do the same. And then you jointly climb the ladder to heaven. And that's
fun.
Yeah. And there's no force necessary. And so if you're resisting your own insistence, then maybe you're bringing a hand that's too heavy even to yourself. And that's worth thinking through. And that's very different than having no standards. It's like children love you if you have high standards. You have to adjust the standards to the situation and personalize them and make them invitational. But there's no difference between having high standards for someone and loving them and encouraging them and paying attention to them. The same applies to yourself. Discipline can be religious adherence to a set of enabling principles rather than heavy-handed tyranny, right? And then it's the discipline that enables rather than the superego that crushes. It's an invitation rather than the oppressive patriarchy, I suppose. And an invitation to play, that's way better than do this or else. So, and equally disciplined, we know that. Athletes who play are very disciplined people when they play at the highest possible level. So you can play with discipline. That's a good deal. That's a good deal. And that's different than force.